Today we're going to look at Zoom settings inside of our free Rockwall ISD Zoom accounts. So that way we have our profile set up in the most secure manner so we can control what happens during our meetings. You can make changes meeting by meeting. However, if you set these in your profile to begin with, then every meeting you create will by default have these settings, at which point you can change them. So let's get started. The first thing you'll want to do is log into Zoom, sign in with your Rockwall ISD account, click sign in with Google. That should sign you in and you'll have a free account. Notice that your free account is limited to 40 minutes. You can only host a meeting for 40 minutes before it will end automatically. We're going to go to our profiles and on the left-hand side, scroll down to settings. And these are the settings we're going to set up for our meetings. That way, whenever we create a new meeting, these will be enabled by default. As we scroll down here, there are a few that we want to enable. By default, all meetings are secured. You can't change that setting. Zoom sets that automatically. We do want all of our meetings to have a waiting room. This means when anyone joins, the host has to admit them into the waiting room. They can't join instantly by clicking on the link. This will help you control who is able to join your meeting. All meetings will have a passcode. You'll have a passcode embedded in the link automatically. You can always edit that passcode if you need to using that pencil icon. However, for the most part, you would not need to edit that, but you could if you needed to for some reason. Your personal meeting ID is the room that you can use quickly if you just needed to send one person a link to have a quick Zoom. However, please review the guidelines from the district on which types of meetings to use depending on who you're meeting with. I would not use my personal meeting room. I strongly encourage you to create a new meeting for any meeting that you have. That way, if there's an issue with that, you can always delete it later. Your personal meeting room will remain. So if something happens to your personal meeting room, there are some issues that you might have to deal with. So I would not use personal meeting ID if you can. I would always schedule a meeting first. The code for their meeting can be embedded automatically in the link. So when you send that link, it will include that passcode. That way attendees can just click the link and join without having to type in an additional password. My recommendation is to keep your host video off when you start the meeting and your participants video off. I would not have these enabled. If you want to enable your camera later, you can do that during the meeting, as well as allow others to enable their cameras. But by default, I would encourage you to keep your video off when joining. Do not allow participants to join before the host. This could result in students or any attendees having conversations and doing things in that meeting before you're actually there to moderate it as the host. So anyone who joins the meeting will be in a waiting room waiting for you to admit them. As I stated before, if you want to use your personal meeting, you can. However, you can always turn this off. This would require you to schedule a meeting anytime you wanted to run a Zoom meeting, but that also gives you more control. Just like having the cameras off when attendees arrive, I would also set it so that all participants are muted when they join. I think we've all been in a meeting before where people are joining and someone doesn't realize they have their microphone on and they're speaking and we can all hear the private conversation they're having. So I would set it so that way all participants are muted when they join. They can always unmute themselves, but this way at least you're starting off with everyone muted and their cameras off. Depending on who the meeting is for, you might want to allow users to save chats. That could be everyone or it could be only the host. You can choose whether you want participants to be able to delete messages once they've posted them in the chat. I would probably uncheck this just so that way nothing inappropriate gets deleted if there's a need for documentation. You can also determine if allowing your participants to use screenshots is appropriate. If I'm using Zoom to troubleshoot an issue with someone, screenshots may be helpful, or if there's no need for this, then you would want to disable that. You can also determine if you want participants to react using emojis that are on their attendee window. Do not enable private chat. There should be no reason that participants need to privately chat with other people in the meeting. Chats should be enabled to auto-save. You can decide if you want to enable sound notifications when someone joins or leaves. This could get very annoying in the middle of a meeting. You should disable sending files in the chat. That way attendees don't accidentally send something into the chat that might not be appropriate. For screen sharing, you want to be very careful with how you set this up. Ideally, you would want one participant to share at a time, and then who can share? By default, it should be the host only. If during the meeting you need to allow your participants to share, then you can absolutely enable that. But by default, I would have it set up only to allow the host to share their screen. You also want to disable screen sharing when guests are in the meeting. You want to keep that disabled. I would turn off remote control, as there's rarely a time that I would want someone outside of my meeting to control my computer. Turn this off by default. You can always enable it later if needed. You also have the option of allowing for nonverbal feedback, where participants click on different icons or react with emojis. If for some reason you have removed a participant because of something inappropriate, I would keep this off. I would disable this setting. That way, once they're removed, they cannot return. If you need to later allow that same user to attend a meeting, you can do that. However, by default, I would have this setting disabled, so that way anyone you have removed from the meeting cannot return immediately. You can allow users to change their name when joining a meeting. That should be okay. However, you can always change it for them if you need to. Participants can rename themselves, and the host or the co-host can rename the participants that are in the waiting room. So before you admit them, if you see a name that might be inappropriate, you can go ahead, the host or co-host in that meeting can change that participant's name that everyone will see. I would enable the report to Zoom feature, which allows users to report any meeting participants that are inappropriate. These users are reported directly to Zoom. You can also enable automated captions. So when someone's meeting, during the meeting, captions will automatically appear on the screen if you would like to use those. You can decide if you want your participants to use virtual backgrounds. This is often helpful if you want to blur what's behind you. I would encourage you to enable stop incoming video feature enabled. That way, when your participants are in the meeting, if they need to, they can turn off the videos that are streaming to their computer. This does not impact the other participants in the meeting, but they're able to turn off the video feature themselves. This is especially helpful if they're having network issues and the video is stuttering and using up a lot of device resources. You can choose whether or not you enable this. However, by enabling this, the host will receive an email when someone joins your meeting, so you know that they're waiting. They will still be in a waiting room. They would have to be admitted, but you'll at least be notified that people have started logging in and joining your upcoming meeting. Now, when you are scheduling a new meeting, you can always go in and set up different settings depending on the meeting that you're holding. I'll click Schedule a Meeting. Here, I want to give my meeting a name. I set the date and the time and the duration. Remember, with a free account, you only have 40 minutes per meeting. If this is a meeting that you want to hold repeatedly, you can select Recurring Meeting and then set how often, including no fixed time, how often it will repeat, what day it occurs, or set an end date or the number of occurrences. By default, you will have a passcode enabled. You cannot disable that. You should have already selected having waiting rooms enabled in your profile. However, you can enable a waiting room for your individual meeting if you'd like. I'm going to start with my video off and the participant's video off. And then there are more options. I do not want to select allow participants to join anytime. I do want to mute participants upon entry, just like we have their cameras off. We most likely do not need to record the meeting. If you do need to record it, you can check this box and it will save locally. You can also block entry to users from specific regions or countries. However, if you have all of these other settings in place, this probably won't be necessary. Once you've made those changes that you want for this individual meeting, click Save. Your meeting invite will be created. You can use the Copy Invitation button to copy the invite info as well as the URL that they will use. And then I can paste that into an email. I can also add it as a calendar appointment to my Outlook calendar. And from my Outlook calendar, I can add attendees as needed as well. And then my Zoom info will be automatically saved on that calendar invite. Makes it very easy for staff to click on to join the Zoom meeting. Remember that you need to be the host. So if this is your meeting, if you click the link on your calendar, it's going to ask you to sign in to be a host. You need to do that. There must be a host for the meeting, so that way you can control what is happening in your meeting. If you are not the host, someone else will be, and that can cause problems. When you are hosting a meeting, you want to use the toolbar at the bottom of the screen to manage your ongoing meeting. You can turn on and off your microphone, on and off your camera. And if you need to test those audio and video settings, you can use these carrots on the right side to open up a menu that allows you to test your speaker and microphone. It's a good idea to do this before your meeting starts to ensure that Zoom is using the correct microphone and the correct camera. You can select different ones here as you see fit. You can see your participants here. You'll see anyone that's pending, and you can admit them. Using this participants menu, you can also remove people from your meeting if needed. You have your chat screen, which allows you to chat with your attendees. Like if I'm sharing a website, I might copy that URL, go to the chat, paste it, and send it to my attendees. Here is where the host can share their screen. If for this particular meeting, you want multiple people to share their screen, you can go to advanced sharing options and choose to allow the participants to share their screens if needed. Maybe most importantly, there is a security button down here. The security button gives you quick access for key things. If you select suspend participant activities, this will terminate your meeting instantly, stop all screen shares, and end the meeting for everyone. You can lock the meeting if you don't want anyone else to join your meeting and everyone's there. You should have already enabled the waiting room by default, but if you wanted to disable it, you could do that here. You can allow participants to share their screen, turn on and off chatting, renaming themselves, unmuting themselves. If you want to mute them and not allow them to unmute, you can uncheck that box. And participants will not be allowed to unmute themselves. They will remain muted. They can choose to start or stop their video unless you disable that. So as the host, this security button has a lot of features you may need to use if something goes sideways. At the end of your meeting, you'll select end and say end meeting for all. If you just leave the meeting, the host will become someone else. It will become a different participant. So you do want to ensure you end meeting for all. If you do want to change the host, you can go to your participants list. And when you're looking at your participants, you can then say, I want this person to become the new host and transfer hosting duties to them. So we'll end the meeting for all, and that's it.